Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our Cabinet meeting, 3 p.m, Monday, the 29th of June, 2020. Once again, welcome to all the councillors. I think we've got about 15 councillors from the last count that have joined us. Welcome, councillors. We appreciate you taking your time out to join us and ask questions on the report or just general questions per se. What I will do before I start the meeting is just make sure that I take at least one question initially from each councillor, because we've got 30 minutes for the question time. So I'll take one question each from the councillors. If you want to ask a question, just type in and somebody will prompt me that you want to ask a question, because I've got a few members down and I'll go through one question each, and then we'll see what time we've got left, like usual. Okay, we've got apologies from Councillor Musrat Khan. I don't think we've got any apologies besides that, so please record that, Andrea. Membership of the Cabinet is full except for Muskan. If any members have got an interest, Cabinet member or any members that are watching, please complete the form attached and hand it in to the committee clerk after the meeting. Item 4, admission of the public. We have got a few members of the public that have joined us who will also be asking questions. Item 4, I've just gone through that. Item 5, deputation and the petitions. Is there any deputations, Andrea? Is there any deputations that you received?
There's no deputations, Chair, no.
Any petitions? I don't think we have we?
No, we haven't.
Okay, no problem, thank you. Item 6, questions by members of the public. Andrea, do you want to read the question and just let me know which Cabinet member needs to refer to?
Yeah, that's fine. So all 4 questions are from James Taylor. The first question is to Councillor Walker. How many brown garden bins are there in Mirfield? And since collection started at the end of February for this year, what percentage of those garden bins have been collected on their scheduled collection date?
Right, thank you, Andrea. There have been 18,040 garden waste bin collections within the Mirfield ward since February to date. During this period, 99.62% of collections were carried out without complaint. Okay.
Thank you. Next question, please. Andrea?
The next question is also to Councillor Walker. Out of 10 collections for my brown bin so far this year, it's only been emptied on the scheduled day 5 times. What does Cabinet think about this level of service for which I'm paying a premium?
Right. Okay. Thank you, Andrea. Firstly, Mr. Taylor, I must apologise for your experience, and I believe the service has been in contact already to discuss your specific issues, and they've extended your period of subscription to match the level of missed collections. Since the restart of the service this year, we've undertaken 99.57% of collections without complaint. That's across Kirklees. During this period, we've also grown the service from around 15,500 subscriptions to nearly 22,500. In the context of the pandemic, I think this has been a significant achievement, and it has helped to contribute to the improvement in our recycling rate over that period. However, this has presented some challenges, and one of the main ones has been that with more people being at home as a result of the COVID epidemic, the collection services have had more difficulties accessing some roads to collect bins. In these situations, the services work with residents and councillors to try and resolve the matter and ensure clear and regular access to our vehicles. I can confirm we will be writing to your neighbours, which we do as part of our normal process, to highlight the issue and the impact it is having. So we will work with yourself, your neighbours and councillors to resolve any problems in the future. Right, that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rob. Andrea, do you want to read the next question out to Councillor Walker again, please?
Yeah, on Gardeners World, they're always talking about how you can get cheap compost from some local authorities, or some authorities that collect garden waste, then turn it into compost and sell it back to residents, not only helping the environment, but also helping out residents who are keen gardeners. Once my brown bin has been emptied, what actually happens to the garden waste that is collected throughout the borough?
Right, the garden waste that is collected is currently transferred to a site in Doncaster, where it's processed, it's composted, and it is then used in compost, which is available to the general public. I think yours is a useful suggestion, and it is one that I will investigate further with officers. So thanks again for that question, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you. Question 4, Andrea. Andrea, is that to Councillor Peter McBride? Question 4.
Next question is to Councillor McBride, yes.
Okay.
Cabinet can't have failed to notice many residents commenting on social media, including newspaper websites, questioning how much the council has paid to buy the George Hotel. Will Cabinet be transparent and disclose to council taxpayers the full purchase price of the George Hotel, or will it be a case in a few weeks' time of reading in the paper a quote from a Kirklees officer stating that it is not in the public interest to know? Councillor McBride, your microphone's muted.
Yeah, legal arrangements are currently in process, but not yet completed. The information is commercially sensitive and will be available when the purchase is completed. I really can't say much more at this stage.
Yeah, I think Peter made a valid point. Because the information is commercially sensitive, it would be foolish to actually let that figure out. But obviously, for transparency and openness purposes, right? Yeah, when the time is right, we will be able to get more information out there. But at this moment in time, it's still commercially sensitive information because there are a number of negotiations other than what we did last week still to take place. Thank you. Next is questions by elected members. Like, okay, I'll go through my list. I'll take one question at a time, and then we'll come back to the beginning. So the first person I've got on my list is John Taylor. John, over to you.
Sorry, Sinead, just unmuting.
Okay.
Thank you. Please, can you confirm who took the decision in light of the COVID pandemic to not take any action to evict illegal occupations of council land? And why was there a U-turn on this policy a week on Friday?
Is this the Grangemore occupation of travellers? Is that the one you're referring to, John?
It's not just Grangemore. I'm actually asking about the policy, because there was
the policy, right? Yeah.
Skelmanthorpe as well.
Right. Which cabinet member wants to take that on regarding our policy on evictions?
I'll do it if you want. I think it seems to have been passed to me. I didn't know I was dealing with travellers until the other week, so I've had a bit of a crash course in these.
Okay.
John, as you well know, there's a court hearing later this week to seek the court's permission to remove the travellers when suitable from Grangemore. The good news for Skelmanthorpe is that the Skelmanthorpe travellers left on Saturday evening, so they've gone. So this is an operational matter. The decisions were taken within that team, which is headed up by the relevant director, and there wasn't a change in policy. The courts were blocked up, and we would advise we shouldn't be moving them. We decided that we would then, at a briefing, we had a discussion that we would apply to the courts. They're not forced to grant an eviction notice. If they grant an eviction notice, that will be in place as soon as it's suitable. Within the public health issues, we will remove the residents from the unauthorised residents at Grangemore, shall we say.
Thank you very much. You got supplementary, John?
Well, yes, and I'd like to just say, well, Graham hasn't actually answered the question. There was a U-turn in policy, and that was confirmed to me by Carl Battersby. You haven't told me who took the decision, and the court hearing is actually today, not later in the week. In fact, it should have happened by now because it was at 1:30. So I'm disappointed there isn't a single member of the cabinet that actually is over the detail on this issue. My supplementary question is: much was made about checking on the welfare of travellers, I asked if we could look at the welfare of local residents, because we've had people who have been intimidated, we've had people who are shielding and are self-isolating, we've had their gardens overrun, they've had people coming through their fence, we've had people who've been threatened, and we've even had, and not just to local members, but also to the press, we've had people ringing up expressing concerns about their mental health. And yet, when I keep asking, nobody seems to be able to tell me what is being done in terms of looking after the welfare of the residents in these areas, not just the welfare of the travellers. So can you please tell me what's being done to look after the welfare of the residents?
Graham, do you want to answer that, please? And then I'll mention a few things regarding the overall policy.
I'll just pick up on the reference Councillor Taylor made to the welfare visits. That's a legal requirement. We have to do that, as you well know. So those are carried out, and without those welfare visits, we cannot proceed to the next level of eviction. We have to go in, carry out a welfare visit, and ask them to move. If they don't move, then we apply to the courts. That's the procedure. As to what's been done with local residents, I'm aware that the police have been heavily involved. I'm absolutely convinced that Carl and his team and community service will be across this. As to the exact detail, I don't know exactly what's being done at the moment, but I'm more than happy to speak to Carl after this and have a chat. I've had several conversations with the local police and the dedicated officer for that. So I know the police have been taking a keen interest on there and been up every time somebody's reported something that is a police matter, the police have attended. So yes, we are doing what we can to look after the residents. As I say, welfare is a legal requirement of this council.
Thank you. Just to clarify your point, John, just for information, the policy is a policy and the law is a law. So I will check with Carl exactly what he meant regarding change of policy, because I've had quite a few of these over the number of years, and in terms of what we can do, it varies, but it's very, very prescriptive in terms of if it's our land, there's a certain course of action we can take, and if it's not our land, there's another course of action we take. But the law is very, very clear on this in terms of what we have to do, and also in terms of the process. What usually happens is, from experience, I don't know if this is going to happen in the current encampment we've got at the moment, but just before the court hearing, they disperse because they know that they've exhausted the full force and the full process of the law, and they will then automatically go to another site. We can only follow what the law says, and our policy is such that we can actually flex it. So I don't think that Carl would have changed policy, but I will check on that because that's quite serious.
They weren't actually taking any court action. They weren't planning on moving them on. There was no application to the court until we intervened.
Let me look at the detail. Let me look at the detail, because I have been getting emails and I do know from other areas, but no, I'll follow it up, John. I'll go on to the next question. Next question is Councillor Richard Smith. Richard, over to you.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. I just want you to confirm, please, that as soon as this possession order is granted by the County Court in Huddersfield, that you will actually enforce this immediately.
Graham, you want to answer that, please?
Subject to the order being issued, we will evict when the public health interest and when the advice that are allowed to evict changes, and it is safe to do so, and it is safe within the guidance under COVID-19.
So I have a supplementary there.
Yes.
Yes. I was a little bit concerned. I was sort of anticipating that answer, really. I've seen emails that allude to a similar statement as well. So when you use words such as when it's safe to do so, and you know, what's the criteria for defining when it's safe to do so, and who is making that decision? Because it worries me a little bit that it's not clearly defined, and I don't know who the person is who decides whether this is the case or not.
That decision will be taken in conjunction with public health, corporate landlord, and the relevant director as to when it is, and the legal department as to when it is safe to do so, taking all those legal requirements, public health issues into account once we have written that order. But as I say, if it's going through today, we may well have it by now. And that's at that point that those decisions will be taken. And as I say, when all those people agree that it's safe to do so and within the guidelines, then we'll move to evict.
What guidelines and what defines the safety?
Richard, I've got a number of members. I'll come back to you because you've added supplementary. But what I've got is that I've actually just managed to get through to Carl. Carl just joined the meeting, who will be able to let us understand fully the operational process and the legal process. So, Carl, can I ask you to just quickly come in, because this is a real live issue we're discussing, and it would be good to actually know the full detail. Carl, over to you.
I can, thank you, Leader. So firstly, to confirm that the possession order was granted by the court early this afternoon. At the same time, we've completed the High Court enforcement order paperwork as well. So we would now look to enforce the order and secure the removal from the travellers from the site, which generally speaking would take 24 hours from the notice. There's been quite a bit of discussion from what I heard around welfare. So we did do some welfare checks of the residents in relation to this site. In fact, I emailed Councillor Taylor, slightly earlier this afternoon regarding that matter. We do have to take account of the welfare of travellers. That's not a local policy as such. That is a national requirement that we do that. And we were aware on this particular site that we had a lady who was actually in slow labour when she came on the site. So clearly we would have to have regard to her and her family's welfare, as well as anybody else on site, before we decided to move forward with the order. So this wasn't a case, I don't think, of us just considering the welfare of one group. We have to consider the matter in the round. The process that we followed is the same process that we would normally follow. So we would carry out a visit on site. We would do a welfare check. We would give what's called a direction to leave to the travellers, and the possession order you seek in court, my understanding is that effectively is when someone doesn't comply with the direction to leave under their own accord. So we've done that. I think this issue we've taken regard to the fact that we are in a public health pandemic, so we are not in normal times. So we have to take account of the implication that has. So we've also put some temporary sanitation measures on the 3 sites. Again, that is something that the government has encouraged us to do, as well as suggested that there may be alternative sites that travellers could go to with better facilities. We don't have any of those that are available within the borough, so we thought in the interests of public health and hygiene that we ought to put those facilities on whilst the travellers were actually on site. So there's been no U-turn in policy as such. What there has been is we have not reacted as quickly as we would have done in normal times, having regard to the public health implications. In terms of whose decision it is to effectively enforce the order, clearly you'd expect us to discuss that with the relevant cabinet member, but essentially that is an officer decision. So that would be my decision to move forward with that, and I've asked officers to proceed on that basis this afternoon. So that is what we will be doing. We would normally as well obviously do a last minute welfare consideration before we decide for the bailiffs to go on site and physically remove people if they do not leave of their own accord, which clearly is the last step. And I think, as Councillor Pandora said, that in the significant majority of cases, people do decide to leave of their own accord before that notice is served. And indeed, the site at Skelmanthorpe, we served papers at 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, and the travellers decided to move from the site before we actually had the possession hearing in court. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Carl, for that comprehensive answer. Next question to Councillor Watson.
Can we just ask Carl to confirm who was the member of the cabinet that they consulted over this? Because there seemed to be some lack of clarity as to who had responsibility in this area.
I don't think there was any lack of clarity, Councillor Taylor. I think you're aware that Councillor Turner was the cabinet member that we had the discussion with last week.
I wasn't saying you were unclear. It was Graham was saying he didn't know it was his responsibility.
No, I think what Graham said was that there's been a number of councillors that have been involved. I know I've been copied into a lot of emails, and I think Graham sort of like was saying that, you know, there's been that many people, and it was me who wasn't sure. So it's my apologies. I wasn't sure who was going to take the question, but then Graham said he's the responsible officer, which Carl has, responsible cabinet member, and Carl made that very, very clear. So my apologies if that wasn't clear at the beginning. Councillor Watson, next question to you, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just following on from the same issue, really, it is very pleasing to know that the travellers left Skelmanthorpe on Saturday morning, because that has been generating quite a lot of traffic on the email for me, and I've been down to the site and spoken with residents, and they were very, very concerned at the way this was being dealt with. It's also interesting to note that they appear to have left within a very, very short period of time after the papers were served. So my question is, why has it taken so long for us to get to that position when it seems to have been a very effective way of dealing with the matter? Because the reality is that 2 weeks ago, I was online here raising questions of Cabinet, and the feeling is that if it hadn't been for the Conservative members actually raising this issue and pushing it, it seems like the Council wouldn't have actually taken any action. So when it's proved to be so effective, why did we wait so long?
Graham, do you want to come in, please?
First conversation I had with officers about this was a couple of weeks ago, and direct with officers. In the meantime, I'd been exchanging emails with them. I'm aware of the amount of concern in the local residents in Skelmanthorpe. At that time, in the first few days of when they arrived, we were in the middle of the height of the pandemic, and the government advice was clearly stay home, stay safe. So it was felt at that point that the public health issue around moving them and potentially moving someone who was infected with COVID into another area was a public health issue. So at that point, there was no decision. The decision was taken not to ask them to move. As things have changed and the advice from government has changed, therefore the actions of the council have changed. When we felt it was safe to do so from a public health point of view and the legal advice we took, then we started proceedings to evict. You're right, they moved fairly quickly Saturday evening or Saturday morning, and they've gone. So that issue's dealt with. But the original advice was stay home, stay safe, and we followed that advice which was the direct advice from government.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Councillor Watson, you got a supplementary?
Yes, I do. It's really to say, well, if we were to find tomorrow that there is another encampment of caravans on the playing fields at Skelmanthorpe, or indeed anywhere else in Denbydale Ward, what action and in what timescales would we expect to see from the council, other than just delivering at taxpayers' expense portaloos, supplies and so forth?
Councillor Turner?
I would expect if anybody decided to occupy the council land illegally, that what we would do is we now follow the normal procedures. As I say, advice from government has changed. We're in a slightly different position. So the first thing we would do would be carry out a welfare visit. At that welfare visit, we would ask them to leave. If they didn't leave, then we would approach the court for an eviction order.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Next question is to Councillor McGuinn. Bernard, are you there? Over to you. Councillor McGuinn, are you there? He's on mute.
Oh,
I think Bernard, you might be on mute. Are you?
Yes, thank you, Shabir. I've managed to sort that out. Okay. I do apologise.
No problem.
Right. It's regarding Penistone Road and Station Road Junction. After 4 accidents in 16 days within June, and after being highlighted last year as a dangerous junction by councillors, will Cabinet support measures to make the Penistone Road Junction safer?
Councillor Walker, can I bring you in, please?
Of course, yes. Thank you for the question, Councillor McGuinn. As you will be aware, there is a meeting which has already been arranged with yourself and ward colleagues for Friday morning to discuss this further. We have, as you say, been looking at this for some time, and there has been a significant rise in the number of serious accidents over the last 6 months or so. Our officers are taking this extremely seriously. They're looking at a number of options and wish to discuss those further with you on Friday morning. I did have quite a detailed discussion about this issue this morning. So I hope on Friday you're able to look at things in a little bit more detail, and I hope you can come up with some plans for the area that you will be satisfied with in terms of dealing with the problem.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor McGuinn, have you got a supplementary?
Well, it's just to say thank you for that answer, Councillor Walker. If that involves any expenditure, I'm assuming that you will be willing to support that then.
Well, that's a kind of hypothetical question, really, isn't it? I suppose because we don't know exactly what that would entail. But yeah, in theory, I do completely accept that that is a dangerous stretch of road. That is proven, I think, by the recent evidence, and we clearly do need to take whatever appropriate measures to deal with the issue. We would have to obviously look at the necessary expenditure for that. But I will be discussing that with the officers following your meeting on Friday morning.
Thank you, Rob. Next question is from Councillor Alison Munro. Alison, over to you.
Hello, thank you, Shabir. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My first question is it's on the same theme as Councillor McGinn's, but I'll just reach out to you. As you know, I've made demands, or you may know that I've made demands for lights at this junction and a reduction of the speed limit along Penistone Road. But all I'm getting back from highways is that they're insisting on us implementing a small-scale scheme. And this will not address the increase in the volume of traffic. It will not address queuing traffic at the junction, and it will not address vehicles speeding on Penistone Road, and it will not provide a safe space for cyclists. Obviously, Councillor Walker's just referred to the fact that we are having a meeting on Friday, but my question is, do you know if they are considering a substantial scheme such as lights? That's what I'd like to know. Will they please put lights in at this junction and reduce the speed limit along Penistone Road?
Councillor Walker, do you want to say?
Yeah, some initial ideas came forward at an earlier meeting, and all that I can say at this stage is that the ideas that the officers are looking at are much more substantial in their scope than was planned at that stage. I think much of that was about issues about sightlines and things. And I think given the seriousness of recent incidents and the evidence that now is built up about the danger on this stretch of road, we will need to take more substantial action to deal with it. I think other than that, I've been asked not to say too much in advance of your meeting on Friday morning, but do rest assured that officers are looking at taking more substantial action.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Alison. Next question is to Councillor Bill Armour. Bill, over to you. Unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Leader. Question for yourself.
Yes.
In normal, i.e. non-COVID times, what plan, and I'm not talking policy, I'm talking plan, does the council have for dealing expeditiously with trespassers bringing vehicles onto Kirklees land?
What I will do is, again, this is quite a, how can I put it, quite open question in terms of when you say, you know, if somebody actually approaches somebody's land, right, council land, so you're talking about, yeah, then we will take action. If you're talking about trespassers who are travellers, and we were talking about that earlier on, well, Councillor Turner actually went through that process, and actually Carl Battersby gave a fuller detail as well, because that's the only thing I can think of that you're referring to regarding travellers, because that has been a big issue over the last few weeks. But if you can clarify exactly what you mean, I might be able to shed some more light on it.
Yes, quite simple plan. Do you have stages written down where you will do this, you will do that, you will do the other, as opposed to policy, an actual written plan for officers to follow? We
have a policy, we have timescales, we have legislation, and depending on each event, looking at its own merits, and actually Councillor Turner eloquently put forward what sort of plan we executed in terms of the trespassers that have encroached on some land in Skelmerthorpe and Grangemore on the back of the pandemic, and he also clarified what the process would be if there was not if there wasn't a pandemic.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Supplementary then.
Yes, supplementary. Yes, no problem.
Obviously, you don't have a plan, so the simple question is why not? I think we should have a plan published.
What I will do, Councillor Armour, I don't carry every single plan this organisation has, because last count, right, yeah, there were thousands of policies and plans and procedures and processes. Now, even I don't think the best officer in this council will have that plan in his head or her head. But what I will do is I will let you have a copy of the plan, that, as you put it, and you know, get it forwarded to you, because you know, because without understanding what sort of plan you're talking about and what the detail is, I can't really answer you because you're being very vague. But what I will do is I'll get you a plan for the question you asked. I don't carry them plans in my head, you know, and if I did, right, yeah, I won't be doing the job I need to do, which is leading the council, not looking at the detail in terms of, you know, the operational elements, right, yeah, which are executed based on what we were talking about earlier on. Next question is to Martin Bolt, Councillor Martin Bolt.
Thanks, Leader. Before I go on, because nothing's been said, I presume that the Cabinet were not aware of the sad passing of Dame Ingrid Roscoe, who for 14 years was Lord Lieutenant of Yorkshire. So can I ask that that is reflected and the flags of the town halls are flown at half-mast and the council does express our sympathy appropriately. Moving on to the question.
Can I just quickly, this one, I'll let you come with your question, Martin. Thanks very much, Martin, for bringing that to our attention. And what I will do is I'll make sure all the appropriate measures are put in place that we can, and I'll raise it with the Chief Executive as soon as this meeting finishes. Thanks, Martin, for bringing that to our attention, and my condolences to the family. Your question, Martin.
Thanks very much. Reflecting on your statement to Council, Annual Council 2019, that you promised that yourself and your Cabinet members would front questions and not deflect to officers. Can you bear that in mind with this? You've said earlier on that the law is the law, the policy is the policy. So bearing in mind the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act of 1994, which gives specific remits for councils to do in case of illegal encampments, why aren't you following the law? Section 77 of that act refers to the specific powers of councils.
Martin, that is a very serious allegation, and just for the record, we follow the law of the land all the time. Your next question, please.
Yes, well, the supplementary, it's not a next question, is Section 77 clearly lays out the duties and powers of a local authority, serving notice under Section 1, acting under Section 2, and so forth, so that we have a clear law, guidance in law about what we can do. And reflecting on comments made earlier, what is Cabinet doing to ensure that travellers moving from one location are not then incurring additional expense and problems to council taxpayers in another? What are you doing to safeguard the public purse and the public health?
Martin, we've gone through this in previous questions, and I don't want to repeat myself, but first and foremost, the Coronavirus Act, which was implemented by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson, and the regulations that kicked in were there to safeguard everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a traveller, if it doesn't matter what background you come from, and what we did as the council is take that advice, which is stay at home, save lives, and save the NHS. Now, I will not discriminate willingly or unwillingly against any group, and just because these are travellers, yeah, I understand that they're breaking the law, but they should be treated as human beings, and that's what we did. We did not differentiate the guidance that was submitted by the Prime Minister to basically take away the human rights of travellers. I am sick and tired of people persecuting openly travellers. You know, we should be ashamed of ourselves, right? Yeah, you know, a lot of work has gone behind the scenes. The questions that have come so far,
persecuting. People have been asking for the people. No, you made some serious allegations.
Martin, I'll cut you off,
people are asking for equality, both for residents and for travellers.
Martin, let me finish. Yeah, travellers are human beings. Yeah,
We know
they are treated in the same way as any other human has been treated through this pandemic. The Prime Minister's advice was very, very clear: stay at home, save lives, and save the NHS. That's what we did. We implemented the Coronavirus Act as it was. Yeah, and when the time was right, based on the Martin, thank you very much for your question. I think we've answered your question.
No,
can I move on to the next question, please? Councillor Warner, can I ask you to take your question, please? Councillor Warner, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. My question is partly a result of a ward meeting, a topic we've got on Wednesday, and because I've had a couple of people contacting me, is regarding the proposed action that the council's planning to take regarding Black Lives Matter. I know you've had some discussion on this, but with the summer holidays coming up and the potential for, you know, some quite innovative, creative projects that could be embraced, music, art, etc., dance, I wondered where we are with the thinking and the planning, because I'd quite like to be involved, as I'm sure many others would.
Yes, no problem. I'll start with the last element of your question first, that you want to be involved. And what I will do is I'll have a chat with you after the meeting regarding how you can be involved. And one of the things I have said on the record, as soon as all this took place from America and then locally we saw all these demonstrations, is we will come back with an action plan very, very quickly. That action plan is being implemented or developed as we speak. As soon as I get more details on that, I'll let you know. But there are things that we are actually starting to do already. We're making connections with local black organisations or black individuals who actually are leading their community in whatever way. So we can actually then start to work with them. And the first thing we need to start doing is start to listen to them. What we're also looking at doing is looking at our recruitment selection process in terms of how we actually go about recruiting staff, the best staff that we can recruit from a diverse background. And one of the things we'll be doing is having people from a BME background to actually be part of that process. We're also looking at developing apprenticeship schemes that are purely focused on black African people, not the positive action training scheme that we were talking about. So there's a number of things that we are actually going to be doing. And what I will be doing is very, very soon, we will be presenting that to all councillors in moving forward. What I've also said is in the Black History Month that will be taking place in October, I will formally report back to the council and to also the black community in terms of what we have done since June when all this started. But I'll contact you separately again how you can get involved, Leslie, because that'll be really great. Have you got supplementary?
Yeah, only that I think there's the opportunity with the summer coming up. Yes. To plan a number of even socially distanced or via Zoom creative activities that, you know, whether it's art, music. I was with Musica this morning talking about the potential of doing African drumming, etc., etc. You know, so I would be quite keen to know as soon as when there is an opportunity for myself and volunteers. People at the Women's Centre were asking me as well that we could get involved in this. That's all. So thank you.
Right. Okay, Leslie. No worries. I'll get somebody to actually speak to you regarding the summer events that might take place and how we can actually build on what you just said. Thanks very much. We've had our 30 minutes, and I think. Oh, sorry. We've got one more person, and I think it's only fair that we let Andrew Marchington, Councillor Andrew Marchington, ask a question. Andrew, your question, please.
Thank you, Shabir. Yeah, it's a question about town centres in advance of the report later on. I think it's appropriate to ask you here. Questions raised by residents with disabilities about accessing the town centre, and I just wanted to know what consultations were made with residents with disabilities before stopping residents being able to park in the centre of Huddersfield, parts of the centre of Huddersfield, where they've used to be doing that.
Councillor Rob Walker, maybe Councillor Peter McBride might want to come in as well. So I'll bring Councillor Rob Walker in first. Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, for your question, and I think it is an important issue. As you know, the recent changes that have taken place from the first tranche of money that was made available through WICA to the council, those decisions and actions had to be taken fairly quickly. There was some consultation with people from disability organisations and so on. But we are aware that as those are just temporary changes, that going forward we will need to consult more widely with people, and also that consultation will be necessary in terms of the actions that we may take with regard to the second tranche of funding. In terms of the details of this, Councillor Bride may be able to add more than that, but just to say from my point of view, it is an issue that's really important to me. I do work very closely with organisations like Experience Community, who are based in Kirklees, experts on these kind of things, and we try and take their advice whenever possible. So I'll pass over to Councillor McBride if he wants to add to that.
Peter, do you want to add anything? Peter, you're muted. If you want to add anything. Peter, are you there?
Robert has largely answered it, but whenever we make a change on the highway, clearly we've got to consult with all relevant groups, and in this case, obviously, it was highly relevant to disabled people. The details of that, I don't have to hand. I'm sure Carl might have them, but certainly the all different communities were consulted before even these temporary measures were undertaken.
Right, okay, thank you very much. Andrew, have you got a supplementary? Andrew? You're on mute, Andrew. You might need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I wasn't on mute. Yeah, thanks for those responses. I think it is worth looking at. I mean, I say at least one of our residents in Goka has expressed concern about not being able to park on Market Street, where they've been used to be able to do, somebody with a physical disability. I think it would be worth, and they weren't aware of the changes, so clearly they haven't been consulted about. They didn't feel they've been consulted about that. So I think it is about making sure that people, particularly people with physical disabilities, are aware of what even in temporary measures, what they can do to be able to access our town centres now they're becoming available again.
Peter, you're mute.
Yeah.
And the issue will be addressed, I promise you.
Right, thank you. Right, okay, we'll go on to the item number 9, adult social care. Oh, sorry, item number 7. Got my papers. Yeah, sorry. We'll go on to item number 7, Kirklees Council Vision for Adult Social Care 2020-2024. I've got Councillor Viv Kendrick, who's going to present on behalf of Councillor Muscan. So Viv, over to you, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is a renewal, if you like, of the Vision for Adult Social Care. And it's about a newly drafted vision for 2020 to 2024 and seeks political endorsement for that to be adopted. It's also an opportunity, should this be adopted, for Cabinet colleagues to consider what services within their portfolio can work within this vision to support and assist adult social care in the way that children's services would look at young carers, about transition to adulthood for those with a disability and so on. I suppose that the biggest thing about this is that this has been a co-produced vision. It was found that whilst we did have a vision before, that many members of the public, service users and carers really weren't aware of it, even frontline staff, and it's been now developed with the intention to ensure that more people are aware and can understand what's involved and what the intention is. So it's being co-produced with those who use the services, their carers, frontline staff, and it's been, during this COVID period, a really helpful guiding document where they've been able to test out some of that vision. So I hope and I propose that we as a Cabinet accept this as the vision for adult social care going forward up to 2024. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Viv. Before we approve the report and we'll go forward, I've got Councillor John Taylor. John, you got a question, a comment on this item?
Thanks, Shabir. It's comments really, it's not a question. So I welcome this, and actually the bit I like most about it are the actual stories, because I think they bring it to life, and I'm a great fan of stories. Whilst I'm a great fan of that bit, there's some bits I don't like. I'm not sure Kirklees Way was a good selection, because a lot of people associate that with the footpath through the district. But you know, it is what it is. My two real gripes though are, if you look on pages in the version I've got, pages 12 and 13, what is our vision about and our values, and it's the graphics. So I'm talking about one which is like a street scene, and then the second one's the tree. I really don't like them. I think that there's too much on them to really, you know, if you have graphics, they need to be simple and easy to understand. And these are just very crowded and too cluttered. I understand that they're trying to get across a lot of messages, but I think by putting too much in one graphic, people just aren't going to embrace it. On the following page is the outcome one, which I love because it's simple and it's not going to be difficult to follow or understand that. I don't know whether it's too late to change anything, but I just think those graphics are just far too busy for anybody to properly really engage with. And my only final comments, and you know, I always have a bit of a grump when I'm on this. Us as councillors were a bit late to the party, so we were only formally consulted right at the end. And I think there are a number of councillors across the chamber who've got, you know, probably could have contributed more because of either their personal experiences or the support that they provided to various residents. So I think, you know, my normal gripe about council should be at the heart of all we do. And I think it's another example of where perhaps we could have been better in terms of engaging councillors. That said, fully supportive of the messages in it. And as I say, I love the stories, but I think the graphics, those two graphics are just awful. Sorry.
Before you come in, I'll give you my 2 pence in terms of the graphics. Right? Yeah, I thought the graphics were brilliant. You know, I take your point; they're a bit noisy, but I'm somebody who actually looks at graphics and takes it all in. And although I can see what you're saying in terms of the outcomes, that graphic is more easy to understand because it's less cluttered. But I'd actually then say that actually there's not too much there. So it depends. You know, some people don't like graphics at all. But I take your point. It's an individual choice.
If you put it through the dementia lens, it probably wouldn't pass muster, to be fair, because you know, and that is part of the people we should be thinking about in this. So I just think it is far too cluttered for a lot of people really to follow and understand. Sorry, Shabir. Yeah.
No. It's everybody. You know, it depends. No, if I show my kids that, my kids would say that the way you did picture, just put a load of words there. Dad. Viv, anyway, I'll let you. It's a comment, so you know it's.
Okay, if I could just say, Chair, I absolutely understand where you're coming from, John, and like you, I was a carer, but this has been worked with individual carers, service users, carers groups, disability groups, and they're the ones who wanted the pictorial scenes. They do look cluttered in this report because they're quite small. When you see them as a full graphic in colour, they are much clearer to understand. And I accept what you're saying about a dementia lens, and it would depend as to where somebody was on a dementia route as to whether they would understand it anyway. All I can say is that the current people who are users of service, etc., are the ones who have been driving this, and therefore I bow down to their decisions rather than my own thoughts.
Right, thanks very much. So I second that, and thanks for the comments, John. As always, very useful. So Andrea, can you take us through the roll call for the voting? I'll second. Sorry? Oh, sorry, Kathy, do you want to come in? I didn't see you.
Yes,
Kathy?
Yes, thanks, Shabir. I just wanted to say it's a lovely report, and it's got everything it says on the box. It's jargon free, easy to read, and it'll ensure that it ensures that we've listened and we're sharing and listening to the views that's most important of the end user. So I just want to commend this report. Viv, I know you've presented it, but well done to Muz and all the officers involved.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, I second that, and I don't think there's anybody else there. So shall we go to the roll call, please, Andrea?
Thank you. So voting on the adoption of the refreshed vision, if members could you state for, against or abstain? Councillor Pandor?
For.
Councillor Kendrick?
For.
Councillor Mather? You're on mute, Councillor Mather.
Naheed?
For.
Thank you. Councillor McBride?
For.
Councillor Patterson? Councillor Scott?
For.
Councillor Turner?
For.
And Councillor Walker?
For.
So that's carried, Chair. Thanks.
Right, thank you very much. We now move on to that report's carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 8, reopening town centres, active travel and cultural interventions. I've got a few members who want to talk on this, so I'll bring you in. I've got Alex and then John and then David, but I'll let Peter McBride present the report first and then I'll bring you guys in. Peter, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Opportunities for cycling in the town centre are limited because of our success so far in pedestrianisation. However, what opportunities there are need to be explored wherever possible. The temporary lockdown produces some opportunities to explore further possibilities, which are consistent with bus access to town and car access to car parks. And it's putting that configuration together, taking account of those factors which limit the opportunities. However, where they do exist, we've got to explore them to the maximum. So that, broadly speaking, is a statement of our policies. I can see some significant opportunities in leading up towards Sainsbury's supermarket, and a link also going from John William Street through the early part of the town before turning round. The opportunities are not great, but where they are, we've got to explore them.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Alex Luchik. Alex, over to you, mate.
Thank you, Shabir. Won't be too long. I'd like to welcome this report's focus on the economic recovery and safe reopening of town centres. I'm pleased that parking charges are suspended until the end of August and hope that in Dewsbury at least we can look at continuing this for the long term. I think we can all appreciate that it's never been tougher for town centres, firstly with the rise of out-of-town retail, then online shopping, and now the impact of coronavirus lockdown and social distancing measures. We have to do everything we can to encourage people to visit our town centres, which are the beating heart of our communities. I hope the council's social media channels will make it a priority to promote the free parking offer and our town centre businesses. The road changes are nearly always controversial, and there's been some coverage in the media. The temporary closure of long causeways causing some upset in Dewsbury due to longer journey times and suspension of some parking spaces. For my part, I've been doing as much as possible to keep people informed about the changes and explain why they're happening. I don't object to trying new ideas in the town centre. As a temporary measure, this has some potential short-term benefits and we can learn a lot from it to inform planning for the Dewsbury Blueprint. The proposed cultural interventions, as the report describes them, are quite varied, and so people with differing tastes should find something to appreciate. I think many visitors to Dewsbury will particularly appreciate the heritage images. A key issue we need to deal with to help the economic recovery is enforcing the public space protection order against street drinking. I know that enforcement is mainly the police's responsibility, but it is raised with me time after time by constituents as it creates a negative atmosphere in parts of the town centre. The Safer Dewsbury Town Centre Working Group was a welcome initiative in the blueprint, but it is yet to have its first meeting. Of course, the lockdown interfered with this initially, but it was due to meet this week and has now been put back another 2 weeks for diary reasons. I hope that we can finally get this group going and do everything we can as a council to crack down on this problem and help people feel safer around the town centre. Thank you, Shabir.
Okay, thank you. Councillor John Taylor. John?
Thanks, Shabir. A couple of comments on this. My first one, and it's my usual one, there's very little mention of consultation with councillors in here. There's lots of talk about consultation with communities, talk about consultation with businesses, no consultation with councillors. So it's another example of councillors not being at the heart of all we do. And it does seem to be a track record. So if you actually stop and read it and read the detail, Peter, you'll see it doesn't make reference to councillors. There's a few references to members of the cabinet. There's also one reference to the ward councillors in Huddersfield, but actually it's not just the 3 Newson councillors whose residents use Huddersfield. There's an awful lot of other people. So that's my point on engaging with us and involving us and giving us an opportunity to have a voice and be consulted. I love the stuff, the cultural interventions, very supportive of that. You can see Kath Davis's fingerprints all over this. And I think, you know, that is something, and what we do need to do, I mean, the one thing the pandemic's done to all of us is left us feeling a bit, you know, fed up, and actually something bright and different and new is something that hopefully will help lift people's mood a little bit. In terms of the more detailed comments that I wanted to make, Councillor Marchington's stolen part of my thunder. I was particularly concerned about the impact on partially sighted people. When I supported the place standard work for the blueprint in Huddersfield, I went and spoke to the partially sighted group in Huddersfield, and you know, I learned an awful lot about the challenges they face already. And for them, change is very, very challenging because they find their way around by being, you know, familiar and knowing which direction they're going in. So I think we need to just be a little mindful of that and how we support them through those changes. And I'm not sure how much engagement there's been with that group that's, you know, sort of based up in Brian, is it Brian Jackson House? Brian Jackson House, I think. And then my other comment, when you talk about investing money in improving walking and cycling, obviously it's a little difficult for residents from my ward, in part of my ward, to walk into Huddersfield. Some of them may be able to cycle, but of course we have older residents who wouldn't be able to do that. One of the things I've been asking for the last 18 months, and actually secured some money for the public through the public realm bid, was the stretch gate, a bridleway to have the surface improved for people walking and cycling on, which will enable people from 2 villages to connect with a station to enable them to get the train into Huddersfield, which again is better than them using their car. So again, I would ask that we look at that as part of this piece of work, about let's not just focus on Huddersfield and Dewsbury, let's think about how we can improve things across the whole of the district. So is any thought being given to, in the more rural areas, about perhaps investing some money in improving footpaths, or, you know, spend a bit more money on getting the weeds cut back so that people can walk across places? I think all of us are doing a lot more walking, and certainly I am out in the rural area. And you know, the state of some of our footpaths that we try and use, you're fighting your way through. So I think let's not just focus on our town centres, let's focus on all of our residents and see what we can do for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Peter, you also want to respond to Alex's question, because comment, because I forgot to bring you in there. Yeah, over to you, Peter. Go on.
Yeah, the point you make, John, is valid. Certainly, we want to involve members, and have very substantially. We're acutely aware that the development of the town isn't the development of a few councillors or a few cabinet members. It's something to involve the public as a whole. These are their towns that we're developing. This report is predominantly about the 2 main towns. But again, I do take your point, John, that there's got to be a consideration of other towns. This report is essentially about those main 2. But we are acutely aware of the points that you are making. And I think in the attempts to engage the public, we've gone a long way to try and engage a much wider public than just simply, well, what we said, the normal people that you would. I think we've gone to a great lengths to try and include as many people as possible. But any further ideas you might have on that count will certainly be taken on board, and I and all officers will be only too willing to listen.
Thank you, Councillor McBride. Councillor David Hall, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Afternoon, everybody. Just 3 comments on the report. First of all, glad to see that the active travel is being taken up. It's a little bit light on the detail, I think, about cycling and walking, but I take Peter's point that a lot of we've already pedestrianised a lot of the town centres. My other 2 points. First of all, just following on from what Councillor Taylor's been saying about the other towns. My 3 most local towns in Kirklees are Murfield, Hetman-Wyke and Cleckheaton. And we've already had people mentioning the fact that we've got very narrow pavements. You know, what we're doing about maybe trying to extend the pavements a little so people feel a little bit safer with the social distancing going in. So I heard what Peter said about this being the first kind of first go at it, Dewsbury and Huddersfield, but I do hope we'll be following in close behind with measures in the other towns. The third thing is that this is purely a personal view of mine, and it's something I've stuck to all the time I've been on the council, is that I've never voted for a piece of public art. I think for £200,000 to be spent at this time on public art is not really on. I can't see any benefits of it at all. I don't think you'll encourage a single person to go into the town just because there's public art there. And the other thing is it's temporary, isn't it? So once you've taken it down and everybody's seen it, that's £200,000 you're not going to get back. As I say, that's just a personal view, but thanks for listening.
Peter, do you want to respond?
Yeah, yes, David, I take that point. The comment was made about public art. They did say that about Angel of the North, and people were very anti it at the time, but I think now people are somewhat reconciled towards it, shall we put it that way. And again, this is a matter of perception. So yes, we want to involve everybody, and we will be taking account of all opinions.
Thank you, Peter, for the response. Martin, Councillor Martin Ball. Martin, over to you, mate.
Yes.
Are you there, Martin?
I am. Thank you very much.
Okay.
I must say, not surprisingly, I disagree with Peter that I think there is far more opportunities for active travel than he's portraying. I'm disappointed with the report that whilst there's plenty of nice pictures about artwork, there's nothing to illuminate what is being proposed for active travel, and in particular cycling in the town centres. Engagement with councillors has been mentioned by others. Nowhere in the report does it mention engagement with user groups, either the Kirklees Bicycle User Group or many of the cycling groups of which we have in Kirklees, who you are hoping will be using these routes. So in terms of working with partners, start talking to the people who are actually going to use them. I've seen no moves by Cabinet to use the powers from government to promote active travel elsewhere, and I've requested several of the intermediate schemes. We've seen pop-up schemes being used in Manchester, Sheffield and various other places where our roads and streets were made safer for users, but unfortunately we haven't seen that. And there's nothing, obviously there's nothing outside the 2 centres that's been mentioned. You know, is it the intention of yourself, Shabir, to appoint an active travel champion in Cabinet to give somebody, like we have again in Manchester, Sheffield and elsewhere, direct responsibility for promoting active travel so they can be held accountable? Section 4.1 of the report critically refers to, for the proposed active travel, comments will be sought from consultees as schemes are taken forward and developed. Well, surely the schemes have been developed now, and there is not really much opportunity or leeway for those to be amended by user groups. Rob's shaking his head, so seeing as you haven't had any user group input now, and presumably you've got costings for this, I'd like to know how we can influence that. And crucially, the question that is being asked is, we hear so much about Huddersfield and Dewsbury and Huddersfield. When is the Cabinet going to work for active travel for the many, not just those 2? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bull. Peter?
I think it must make the point. Peter? I think it must make the point. This initially was a report predominantly about the two major towns. Indeed, the point's been made before and here that the other towns matter. Of course they matter. And subsequently, we'll see a report which encompasses the needs of literally all of our towns. But the dominant two are the first, obviously, in a series of reports.
How do you get to them, Peter?
Pardon?
How do you get to those two?
I'm sorry, I'm not with you.
How can somebody who's nervous cycle to enjoy this utopia of Huddersfield and Dewsbury if the roads to get to and from them haven't been modified?
I just want to put the issue of cycling into some sort of perspective. What percentage of the population who move about do so by cycle? It's something less than 0.01%, whereas the use of the town centre by walking is very significant.
And what is the percentage increase that you've signed up to increase? You've signed up to a 300% increase.
Can I, Martin, let Pete answer, right?
What is dismissing cycling? Is dismissing cycling, but yet he's spending money on it. It's
no, let him answer, and then I'll bring you back in. Is that okay?
Where the opportunities for cycling occur, and the papers themselves give you evidence of this, the opportunities are being fully explored and will be developed, but they are limited, partly because so much of the town is already pedestrianised. Very significant part is, which is surely to the benefit of the most important users, which are people using the town on foot. That is not to exclude cyclists. So it isn't a game of which user against another. It's a question of using the opportunities which pertain in any given part of the town to exploit them to the full, to enable people to use the most active forms of leisure. And that is the objective. It is not to exclude people.
Martin, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thanks. Just to remind Cabinet, who may not be aware, that across West Yorkshire, the authorities are signed up to a 300% increase in cycling. So dismissing the current base user group is wrong, because you are all committed to upholding that and increasing it. Peter, you need to understand that irrespective of how people arrive at a town centre, yes, all users of shops are pedestrians. Whether people come by train, bus, car or cycle, when you're actually spending money, you are a pedestrian. Yeah. So I think we should be not being dismissive of you are, but saying that let's get people in, let's provide storage for them, and let's get them into the town. Let's improve our road network or our greenway network so people can get to our town centres and shop.
But every one of our major road schemes has features which are to encourage cycling. So far from preventing, we're actually encouraging it to the maximum. The point is, at the moment at least, the demand is very, very limited indeed. And we're trying, where possible, to explore the opportunities of expanding it.
Right, thank you. I've got Councillor Viv Kendrick who wants to come in. Viv, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really sort of following on from comments that Councillor Marchington made and Councillor Taylor, in that I do support this report, but I would like to see some thought or something very overt about disability issues. I'm not clear, a cycle-only street, is that all right then for somebody on a motorised scooter to go down? So I think for this to be really effective, there needs to be some publicity about where people who need disabled parking can park to get to where they need to go, and that which areas are all right for you to use, a motorised vehicle because of your disability. It's really just that as a comment, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Naheed Mather. Naheed?
Yeah, I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to respond to Councillor Bolt. I think this is our opportunity opportunity to put right what we haven't had in the past. So pedestrians and cyclists are being targeted. We're also in a pandemic. We're trying to make our town centres attractive for all and getting people out of their cars into walking and cycling. So he knows that at the moment we are actually engaging. West Yorkshire Combined Authority has an engagement tool where you can put in your postcode to let us know what ideas and what projects, and all the projects he's ever come up with are there for us to look at. So there are schemes at the moment which is targeting those very people he's talking about, and even other towns. We know, I only read it last week, that we are thinking of streets even in Cleckheaton. It takes time, and this is our opportunity to focus on our two main centres whilst we're trying to attract people into our town centres. So pedestrianising, making sure that we've got cycle routes, when we've got the staffing capacity back to making sure all our walking routes are open, because at the moment with the pandemic, we're below par on those areas. We are trying to cut back and make sure our pathways are open and more people can ride from their rural localities into town centres if that's what they want. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Rob Walker. Rob, do you want to come in? Rob, you there?
Yeah. Thank you, Shabir. Yeah, coming back to Martin's point, Martin and I think, have spent quite a bit of time discussing these issues. And I think in general terms, we agree with each other that it's really important to encourage active travel. And I also agree with the points made by Councillor Taylor that in the longer term, as public transport opens up more, we need to link people into public transport as well, particularly the people who might be less mobile and live further out of town. But I do think Councillor Bolt in particular has been rather unfair about the actions which have been taken already using the tranche 1 of money from Wicker. As he will well know, because he's part of the committee, there was a very tight timescale given for local authorities to submit their plans. The responses made, it makes it seem like we've not done anything. And he cites other councillors who've taken action. And he must know that we have taken action. We did submit plans. Many of the things in those plans have already been implemented. And you can see the changes in places like Dewsbury and Huddersfield, which have already been referred to. Do take his point that you need to get people into the towns. But again, as Councillor Bolt will well know, that's going to be part of the tranche 2 process, where in the longer term it's going to be about the rest of the communities. It's going to be about linking those together and linking them into the town centres. So the kind of things that are happening. Just this morning I've been speaking to highways officers who forwarded information to Almondbury ward councillors in relation to a question asked at the last cabinet meeting, which was about youngsters walking to King James School and about the measures that we could take. Councillor Mather referred to the Wicker website, where you can register interest in those kind of projects and raise concerns. That information has been passed through to the councillors, and that's where we need to get the councillors and the wider communities involved. And I completely agree, we need to do work to link in these communities into our town centres and the other small communities as well. Okay, thank you, Shabir.
Thank you, Rob. Final comment from Councillor John Taylor. John, over to you.
Sorry,
Are you there, John?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, I forgot to mention under section 2.5, monitoring and review, it states that this is talking about the first changes that we've done. It states all these measures will be carefully monitored and reviewed. It'd be interesting to know by whom and what are the outcomes we're looking for. So have we done that piece of work to understand how we know whether we have actually been successful or not? So obviously we need to, you can only prove that you've been successful if you measure something. So what are the measures? What are the outcomes we're aiming for? And who's undertaking the review and how are they going to do that? Because I remember, and I hesitate raising bus gates when Richard's on the call, but I remember there being huge debates about or arguments over footfall and how, you know, how we were measuring footfall and whether it was being measured accurately and things. So I think if we are, we just need a bit more information, perhaps a bit of questioning around that bit, please, if that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Peter, do you want to just respond to that and then we'll go to the vote? Peter? Peter, you might be on mute.
With regard to bus gates, information was an infinite amount of information. The issues were fully explored, mostly totally ignored, and the prejudices were just indulged. So one wonders to what extent information is duly used to inform decision making. In the case of the members of the council, it was.
Thank you. Thank you, members, for your input.
Shabir, sorry, we missed most of that, Peter. We only got the bus gates bit. Sorry, you were on mute.
You were on mute when you started, so you want to just? We only got half your response. So you want to repeat, please?
My response.
Peter? Yeah. We only got half of it because so the technical glitch. So you wanna just repeat the whole thing again, please?
Oh, I just picked up on a point that was made about bus gates. I think the issues were fully explored. The information from the papers was explicit. It did explain exactly when and how the policies had been made and how they've been made over a number of different administrations and had been universally supported till the point of actually implementation, when suddenly there seemed to be a significant difference. Now everything seems to have bedded down. Everyone seems to be reasonably happy with the final outcome. That's all.
I've just got a note. Kathy, do you want to come in? Councillor Kathy Scott. Kathy? I've just got a
no,
message.
I didn't. Just when John said 2.5, I just put 1.5. So if anybody was looking, it's 1.5.
Right.
So,
okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Peter hasn't actually answered my question, though, has he? It wasn't about bus gates. It was
about outcomes.
It's what are the outcomes we're hoping to achieve? Have we defined those? Because it says we're going to monitor and review, but we need to understand what it is we're, you know, how do we know if we're being successful? We don't know what the outcomes are.
What we'll be monitoring and reviewing is these minor experiments that are currently taking place to see to what extent they can be maintained and sustained when we have traffic back to the norm. At the moment, we've got a number of experiments taking place in both Dewsbury and Dewsbury, and we'll see when you've got full, what should we say, restoration to normal traffic, which of those can be retained. So I think that is the full measure of these current experiments and how effective they might be.
Right, thanks. Thank you very much, members, for your input and contributions. Andrea, can you please take, I second that report, obviously. Andrea, can you please take us through the roll call, please, for the voting?
Yeah, so the vote is on the recommendations set out on page 28. Councillor Pandor?
For.
Councillor Kendrick?
For.
Councillor Mather?
For.
Councillor McBride?
For.
Councillor Patterson?
For.
Councillor Scott?
For.
Councillor Turner?
For.
And Councillor Walker?
For.
And carried, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 9, but before we make a decision on item 9, there's also item 11, which is a private report. So unless you want to go in a private session, can I just confirm that all cabinet members have actually read and understood the private report?
Yeah.
And we are then able to make the decision in item 9 in public, so we don't need. Yeah, okay. Councillor Viv Kendrick, over to you, please.
Thank you, Shabir. This basically is a good news story. This is about investing in key day centres, dementia day centres within Kirklees. That we have one in Murfield, we have one in Almondbury, but they really are past their sell-by date, if you like. And times have changed. The needs of people with dementia and their carers have been much more clearly identified in recent years. And the intention is to invest in rebuilding new centres with an enhanced centre, which will also provide support and information for carers, support and information for frontline staff and others. So it will be a fantastic development. The money is in the capital budget, and this report is asking us to invest and agree to the progression, first of all, with Knoll Park House in Murfield, which will need to be completely replaced. I hope that members will be able to support this, and I thoroughly recommend this report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kendrick. I'd like to second that. I don't have any members who want to talk on this. Oh, sorry, Councillor Martin Bolt. Martin.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. I hope you're going to support this report, Martin. It's in your ward.
Well, if you'd give us a chance, I'd like to endorse everything that,
okay,
Viv has said. And also just ask that on the report on page 1, where it says ward councillors consulted, could you please include the fact that myself and my colleague Kath Taylor were consulted, and I'm sure if she were here, Vivian had asked that you spell her name correctly as well. But all ward councillors in Murphy were consulted, and we are all unanimously supportive of this, and thanks very much for it.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, I don't think we've got any more. Sorry. Oh, Viv, sorry, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, Martin's absolutely right. When I looked at this report over the weekend, the first thing I did this morning was to ask why only one ward councillor from Murfield had been consulted. I was reassured that they all had been, but it is just unfortunately a typo and they have been missed out from the report. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Andrea, you want to just make a record of that? So we've got it on public record that all 3 councillors were consulted, and Martin just confirmed it. And also, write in red that Martin was really complimentary of this. We aim to please.
Is this a record?
Anyway, Andrea, I second that report. Can we go through the roll call, please?
Yeah. Sorry, could you just write it in blue, please, Shapir, not red?
I mean, write it in bold. Anyway, thanks, Martin. Anyway, roll call, please.
Councillor Pando.
4.
Councillor Kendrick.
4.
Councillor Mather.
4.
Councillor McBride.
4.
Councillor Patterson. You're on mute, Councillor Patterson.
Are you there, Carol?
Yeah, sorry, 4.
Councillor Scott.
4.
Councillor Turner.
4.
Councillor Walker.
4.
Thanks, Chair. It's carried.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the meeting, and I really appreciate all councillors coming and taking the time out and asking the questions. Also, thank you to members of the public who put questions in, and for public who were listening, and for cabinet members for taking the time out and all the hard work that's gone behind the scenes to get these reports here. So once again, thank you very much, and good night. God bless. Thank you.